Hi, welcome everyone to this session. I would love to introduce to you, for those who don't know, a human being that I think is a rare gem in the world, who I had the privilege to meet a few years ago, Mrs. Fiona Matthews, who has an incredible story to share about first as a BBC journalist and the work that she was doing there, but then becoming the founder of the Earth Champions Foundation, which goes all over the world for the last 20 years. And very interesting for those who were plugged into the session before, works with cities and at the city level to identify those local heroes who are actually living sustainably and in an inclusive and collaborative way in society. So, and Fiona will share a lot more about that, but, you know, welcome, Fiona. Welcome, Fiona. How are you?
I'm very well, Margaret Rose. How are you?
Oh, we're good. We're good on this side. I'm excited to have this.
You've put together a marathon, and I'm very, very astonished and proud of what you've done.
Okay, thank you. But so did you prepare a presentation, or shall we have a conversation? Okay.
Yes, I have. You asked me to talk specifically about India this time.
The work that you're doing on India, yeah.
In India. So I have put together a sort of PowerPoint that takes you through what we've been doing there and why we began. I don't want that over there. So, sorry, I have a helper here.
That's all right. While you're doing that, I just want to share with those who were here in the session before, you know, this would be like a bird's eye view from the looking in on what's happening at the ground level. Ties in very much with what Professor Shruti Pandey was sharing, you know, about urbanization and the stuff that's happening in these.
At the real local level.
Yeah.
I actually, thank you, Margaret. This is an extraordinary opportunity to speak to everybody. Thank you. One of the things I learned over many years of interviewing people and meeting people as a reporter was the enormous courage everyday people have. There's the famous who get a lot of attention anyway, but the real grassroots are where we actually have to go to change where we're heading at the moment. I do believe, as many people have been saying during your program, that the leaders have lost their way. They seem to be out of touch and quite often removed from the issues that are affecting people, particularly the politicians. Lawyers and the legal structure is racing to keep up with all of the massive transition we're all into now. What, very briefly, I'll just, how do I do this? I'll put on the front section here.
Margaret, you need to enable screen sharing.
Okay,
Wrong.
Can you see
screen
that?
sharing?
Yes, can you see that? It's a pilot program we did in India. Thank you. It's basically why did I even start to do this sort of work? You know, in my sort of, when my children had grown up and were at university and things, was the realization that no one person or no organization has solutions for the 21st century massive issues we're facing in the future, especially in, you know, climate change is going to impact everyone, rich and poor, whether we like it or not, because everything, every breath we take, every mouthful of food we have has come from the natural world. And we're racing towards some huge issues in the future. Sorry, can you see that front page?
It's happening in a minute.
I think, you know, as you'll hear later from Professor Ed Cozier, the world, when he first started building plastic recycling plants, was really not interested. You know, 24, 25 years ago, to be building a plastic recycling plant usually got oh really, and look away and not interested. And there's still a little bit of that about climate change, not so much now, but even 5 years ago, when you'd say we're seeking solutions for clean air and safe food and things, people go, that's out there, it's not my problem. But they're beginning to. Now we're seeing how interconnected we are with just one tiny weeny little virus. This tiny weeny virus that none of us can see has brought the whole world to a standstill. And with all the science and the ability to send people to the moon, we still can't quite make it. Now we're just trying to get into seeing this program that we're doing in India. I was asked to go and compare the plastic film issues that, or our foundation was to write a report for the British and the Indian government on how each country dealt with plastic bags and plastic film. And it's really very interesting in discovering that, in fact, in India, they're probably further ahead than we are in Britain, which is most interesting. But more importantly is our program around the world looks at best practices and what can be shared across boundaries and how do people function to improve or fix issues. This is out of that, while I was in India looking at the plastic issues, I came across the most inspiring women, mostly women, 11,000 of them, who are the women pickers in India. These women, can you now see the first slide?
Yes,
Margaret?
we can.
We can, hooray, good. I'm beginning to think I might just have to ad-lib the whole way. This is about 4 or 5 years ago, the public suddenly became acutely aware of how scary the plastic in the oceans was, and that they suddenly realized that we're deeply interconnected with every animal and every drop of ocean and water and things. And when I was in India looking and researching the issues around how does the government deal with the plastic film, how does the general mums and dads do it, we came across a method that they have there that we don't have in the West, where the government of Pune, which is a small city of only about 8 million people, versus Mumbai, which has 31 million people, decided that they would let the women who were known previously as the untouchables become very involved. They were already collecting waste, and a lot of them were on the landfills collecting. But they decided with the government to start going from house to house, collecting the wet waste and the dry waste. The dry waste were the recyclables, the wet waste was the food waste. And these women self-organized in 1994 to begin to collect the waste. Let me just move to the next. Here we are. So most of the collection is informal, and the two alternatives had been, up until recently in Pune, either they collect it, and because plastic waste has no value, they would either burn it, which is why the air is appalling, or they would throw it away into the rivers, which is why we have so much problem in all the rivers around the world now. As you'll see soon, there are 10 rivers in the world that contribute 90% of the plastic to the oceans. So these 11,000 waste pickers are women who, sorry, you can probably see Ed wandering around. These women decided, instead of just working on the massive landfills, they would start collecting in a very organized way. So they set up a sort of cooperative where they began to buy uniforms, and they begged, borrowed, and whatever, trolleys to go from house to house. As they got better organized, they set up a medical system and a small fund for their schooling for their children. They didn't want their children to end up being in the same predicament that these women were most of the time. So I will bring you into what's happening. Their quality of life is extraordinary. They're very tenacious. They go to 200 houses a day, each day. Can you see this next
Yes.
drawing here? as I was saying, in the middle here, you can see that there are 10 rivers that contribute 90% of the plastic to the oceans. Those 10 rivers, 8 are in Asia and 2 are in Africa. And the other 10% is the West, where we've actually got a lot of recycling happening. And they don't usually discard plastic into the rivers, except a few lazy people. But generally, it's a massive problem because there are no systems in Asia. These women actually exemplify a great way to go, because not only are they now organized, but this cooperative is a negotiating program that they have. And they've now begun to work actively with both the local council and the federal government. It can become a model that can go to other places. As these women collect the waste, this shows you here how when they collect it, the cooperative then begin to sort it and they upsell it. In the afternoons, when they've collected 200 houses each, they sit, unfortunately, in the boiling heat and sort the wet and dry waste. The wet they put into compost, the dry they upsell at the end of every week. However, when the monsoons come, everything gets washed away. And in the heat, it's sometimes up to 40 or 50 degrees in the extreme heat, and they're very, very compromised. There are shelters, a few of them around, but they're not many. So that's something we love to help raise some funding, even just to have a sort of a tarpaulin that they can put up. Because if you build something permanent in the streets, many people will fill it up for them during the day, not just them. So they have a bit of a problem because there are so many people that are homeless. But what we're showing here, that if we can provide some funding for their shelter, and very importantly now masks, because of course COVID is rampant around all of India. And the other thing is that as they're sorting, they really do need gloves, and they have very poor gloves. There are gloves that we've realized that they could probably get about 20 pairs of gloves for $10, which is about £5. So it's a very big help. If they get small amounts of money, they distribute, but they're very, very equitable. So of course, in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, this plastic will not end up in the seas, but it will mean that globally, the system begins to impact us as well. If we can help them to become more effective in collecting, then we don't eat the fish that has the pieces of plastic and so on in it. Move on. So who are we? We're a charity in the UK, and we promote urban resilience and sustainability. We've been doing this now, we've just passed our 20th year. And over the years, we do a call to action in different cities with the mayor for the communities to nominate their own outstanding local heroes. This is really the core business that we do. We haven't really done that in India. We're about to, but now we've got COVID, we won't be doing anything there right now. This program, we believe that there is great knowledge and wisdom with everyday people, and we found that. For example, when we started, we ran the first one in Australia, and the judges then were headed up by the environment agencies, and they found one that we got hundreds of applications from around the country, but we had experts. Our secretariat don't sit on that. We interview everyone face to face for an hour, and then we write it all up, and that goes to 2 levels of judging: the local judges for that city and then the national judges. So we had, that was the first. We ran another one then in Switzerland because we wanted to prove to the Swiss Olympic Committee that you don't only have to have athletes that are champions, you can have people that champion the fresh air, the food, the energy systems, water, and so on. Since then, we now have collected, over these years, accredited 442 extraordinary people. I'm just taking on a sideward path because this is the best practice that is happening in India. So I'm just explaining that there are many, many solutions, and we need to find them very rapidly, especially for our children. A quick look at some testimonials from people. Okay, that with the UN Environment Programme, the World Conservation Union, and Munich FREE. The challenge today is that the world is struggling with plastic, it can either be repurposed, recycled, or a lot of people in countries that are a little bit lazy use it for energy. But the best thing is to turn it into a new product. I'm just going to move through this quickly because I can leave this. How much time have I got left, Margaret Rose?
Not very much. We have
No,
about 5 more minutes. And I did want to ask you, a question. Is it okay if I ask you the question now though? So,
Yes, please.
like,
That's all right.
because what is really interesting is, you know, building off of the conversation we had with Professor Shruti Prandy earlier, was the relationship between the city and people and the commoditization that is going on at the city level. And you seem to have identified and been working with this, the Pune women who are taking on the responsibility of addressing the plastic waste. And you're also working with the city. I'm wondering, what is the relationship, the partnership, if any, arrangement? If you could give us more details around that between the city and the Pune women, because you're saying that they need money. So I'm wondering, what is the responsibility of the city? What's the city doing in the context of dealing with this waste? And how far are you in terms of forging a partnership there?
When I first went there and met them, they were doing 52% of the city's waste collection. And you can see in this diagram that that street's a typical street that's not being cleaned. This is a street in a poorer area, and it's impeccably clean. The difference is profound, and the public become very proud of it. The council could see this is a fantastic way, that the city council, to restore and give jobs to people. I met with the mayor, who's a woman, and talked to her at length about us perhaps building a small plant for them, which Ed Cozier and Next Tech would donate to the city, their time and effort. There's some expense in putting the equipment in, but they would do that and they would train the local engineers, and the women would not end up being bullied by the middle people buying and selling their plastic, because often the price will fluctuate, and these women are often supporting whole families of, 12 people or something in their very simple, often slums. The mayor was very impressed because they were going to do something else instead of supporting the women at that time, and this is about 2 years ago. And they were going to put in something that was going to be very dirty, and it was going to be burning plastic in the middle of the city. And when I said, what if you actually empower these women and you give them the trolleys? They already had the uniforms. You can see in the picture there a small trolley on the left-hand side. That's what they put around behind them. And since then, these people have been granted about 18 months ago the rights to do the whole city, which is fantastic. As you can see here, they're in uniform, which they can't all afford, but the council is also giving some support there. They have an education program where they're teaching the public how to do this. And the council can see that this is a practical way of giving life and dignity to the poorest people, and at the same time saving themselves a lot of money, because it truly is a grassroots up program, and it's very replicable into other cities. There are so many millions of people wanting meaningful work and to get organized. This model is very organized, and they're very proud of it, and they have training programs. And as Robert knows, who I think is there, we went to watch one of the women. Her mother came out. She'd started being a picker when she was 12. The daughter had got 2 or 3 years, 3 or 4 years of schooling, and she was with one we followed around. And then we met her son briefly, and he's now at university. So that's 3 generations. When you give people a chance to be educated and lift themselves out of poverty, they will, and they become contributors on every level. So in answer to what you asked me, I think that it's been happen chance, but their determination to keep working and intercepting the waste is driven from the bottom up, and the And it wasn't just my visiting, they noticed, but they were about to make a very bad decision in really cutting the women's work out by just burning the plastic. It would have given them really no value because it's very inexpensive to do that. But by recycling it into new products, that's opening up doors for engineering. It's giving them an ability to distinguish, is this PET, is this polypropylene, whatever they're going to be doing. So it's a very valuable new product that's from fossil fuels. We should not be burning it and then having to go and plunder more fossil fuels. We have to make it a circular economy as fast as possible. The Modi has just last year brought in a rule that all that food waste must be composted by all the high-rise. Now, we don't even have that in our country or in Europe yet, but it's a mandate. So these women now have this extra responsibility, the wet waste. They've got great big composting systems right next door to these tall buildings, and they're adding ash and things to it, and they're doing it. It's very effective. This is quickly showing you how this can be enriched if you can give them some sort of support.
Fiona, I want to just bring in a comment that Michael has made, which I think is important. He's wondering if your plastic reduction projects and what the women are doing in Pune could provide carbon offsetting opportunities. And I guess what he is actually pointing us to there, which I think is really important, is there may be opportunities here for public-private partnerships to support the women of Pune, because corporations could fund and use that. So have you explored that?
Absolutely. I must thank you for the question, Michael. The question of the CO2 reduction is profoundly important, because for every ton of CO2 of plastic that's recycled, it has just stopped 1 ton of CO2 being emitted. And that's been, I can send you documents on that. There's a lot of extraordinary reason this goes hand in hand to bring the plastic into this circular economy, because it absolutely reduces the CO2. And that's something that the big boys are becoming very conscious of. And not only that, in Europe now, the European Union has passed a very important rule that every ton of CO2, every ton of plastic that's going out virgin, they will be charged 800 euros a ton. So they need to have a minimum of 30% plastic that's been recycled. So this is a whole new market, and it's also very morally good for the community, because this plastic, when they've processed it, even just as simple granules, this can be exported, and you've just stopped massive amounts of the plastic ending up in the rivers. People are desperate to know where to put it. Into the rivers it goes. But if they've got an effective, small, simple recycling system, then yes, it's a great market for the Europeans to buy and intercept all that plastic. And it's giving the women the whole cycle, instead of having to go and negotiate at the end of every week with all of their different plastics to different marketeers. And this small plant, I can take you to the end of that, has been costed in. I'm just showing you another quick way in which these women, this is post-industrial, and the women do the post home-based stuff. But as you can see, the systems are very primitive and very difficult for them. And probably that's a very big bonfire potentially, which is a worry. So the benefits are here. I'll leave you with this report and you can run through it. It's very quick and very easy to go through. This is not something we presented to the government. We just did it because we knew it had to be done. The one that went to the government is a very different report, about 100 pages. This is showing you that if Nextech worked with the municipal council, we're working with the women, and Nextech will design, and they're one of the best in the world in terms of their design. They design for all the biggest companies, recycling plants, and they've offered to do this pro bono, to design it, and then all that has to be bought is the actual systems. And I was talking to someone who delivers technology, and I was telling him about it, and he said, oh, we'll give you an extruder, you can have one of ours, because this is a good cause. So I thought, great, you know, we can go and invite the big boys who do this. We could deliver something, a world-class but simple program to the pickers, and give them a true industry that can carry them forward. This is the supporters, if the supporters or investors want to come in. Supporters, if you're a mum or dad, you might like to just give some money for gloves or masks or uniforms. That would be huge. Another enormous issue, which I haven't talked to you about, and it brought me to tears when I first met them, was I said, what do you do about drinking water? And they get the water from the rivers, which are disastrous when they're out and about. And how about going to the toilets? And the woman who runs it, who's very proud and wonderful, said, oh, we don't have toilets. And I said, but can you go? You go to the same 200 houses. Could you ask if you can use the toilets? No, couldn't possibly do that. I said, so what do you do? Because, of course, they're considered not part of the same strata. And she said, many of us wear nappies all day, every day. I was horrified. So we actually are looking into how we can afford to get mobile toilets and perhaps have trucks going around and help collect the material to go back so the women can have maybe some mobile toilets on the trucks. We're not sure, we've got to look into that. But apparently there's different things. So
Fiona,
this is
Fiona, I'm looking at the time, and we will have to, you know, finish now. Thank you so much for sharing so much. Thank you for sharing on, you know, a view from the ground, an innovative project that has been developed from the bottom up, where, you know, the city is giving support and there are opportunities for corporate partnership to make this happen. And so it was really interesting because you are showing a positive and real opportunity for city partnerships to stimulate this.
Yes, to reach across borders and reach the poorest of the poor, because the poorest of the poor are the ones that are making the most profound effect on the oceans of our world. If this can be modeled out to other cities, it could be a huge shift. There's no point trying to scrape the top off, floating out at sea. 3/4 have already sunk. The surface is not. Once it's reached the sea, it's too late. You have to go to the cause of it, not to the symptom. Thank you for the great opportunity. I'm sorry I was taking a few minutes to get taking off. We thought
that's all right. That's all right. That's all right. Thank you.
Thank
you, Fiona.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Good night. All the best. Bye-bye.
Good night. All the best. Bye.